I've hired some people out of college with safety degrees, and not a one of them has ever worked out, right? And so now we hire the people, not the degrees, and it works out much better. But that feeds into that longevity in relationships because you understand how those things have to work.
Welcome to the Canary Report, the podcast where risk leaders, safety professionals, and operational executives come for real-world stories and smarter strategies to keep people safe. I'm your host, Michael Zhao. In each episode, I sit down with exceptional leaders who are transforming how risk and safety are managed. Whether you're a leader of a nationwide EH&S program in a high-risk industry, or you champion workplace safety across 200 retail locations, this podcast is for you. Let's get into it. Welcome to the Canary Report, the podcast for risk leaders and safety professionals and operating executives who come for real-world stories and smarter strategies that keep people safe. I am your host, Michael Zhao, and today joining us is Nathan Haynes. He is a safety director for North America at Weber Ferrovial Company. Why would we listen to Nathan today? Well, first of all, because the man is exceptional. Let me tell you a little bit about the Ferrovial Company as well as Weber and why he's speaking with us today. First and foremost, he's a human being, and as we always start that, we want to talk to great human beings who run human operations, and he is among the best, one of the world's best and North America's best heavy civil and infrastructure builders. They are spanning from Texas and Florida and Georgia and Virginia and Canada. They have a lot of different moving parts, delivering massive transportation, waterworks, energy, and infrastructure solutions. Nathan is a center of all of this in North America, keeping a safety culture for his organization across 50 active construction projects at any given time, over 40 infrastructure maintenance contracts at any given time. And his background is really fun, and we're going to talk about it a little bit. So thank you, Nathan, for joining me, and welcome to the podcast.
Well, thanks for having me. I'm really looking forward to it. This is a great opportunity. Our conversation so far has been engaging and a lot of fun. I am a small correction, the director for the infrastructure division, not the heavy civil. And so, yes, the 40 projects across North America are mine. Heavy civil, I don't want to ask me too many questions because I'm not sure how you build bridges.
You've got your hands full with what you've got going. So, in fact, I am excited to talk to you about the things that you are responsible for because you have a really fascinating purview. So, it's funny because I saw on your background that you are a board certified master arborist. And I thought that was fascinating. Can you give me, I know in both private and municipal forestry, I want to talk about your history because you've got a really interesting background, but specifically on the arborist part, how did that come into play in your journey? I mean, this is a I was reading and I'm like, I want to ask him about that. So I'm going to kick off there.
It's kind of an interesting story. I mean, mostly I needed a job is how it happened. I met my wife and I worked on the North Slope in Alaska. I did inspections, non-destructive testing, radiography, and ultrasonics. And when I met my wife, we moved to Utah. And it was sort of out of the blue. I had no plans to move to Utah. I just did. And you can't find a job x-raying welds in Utah like you can on the North Slope. What they pay you is slightly different. I needed a job and I tried a couple of things. And then we kind of met a guy who was in a tree. He was in business doing trees and hauling. He cleaned out garages, mostly of garbage and stuff like that. And he said, look, I'll show you how to do it. You put an ad in the newspaper and you can go and clean out some garages and maybe you trim their bushes. And so I started doing that. And after a little while, the city took over cleaning out people's garages. You could just throw all your junk out in the street and they would come and pick it up with dump trucks. And so there was nothing left to start cutting trees. We turned it into Advanced Tree Service. We had one of the biggest tree companies in Salt Lake City. I had spent 20 years as an arborist from then on. Yeah. And then unbeknownst to me, we sold that business in 2017. It's still running today. I'm really proud of that. But, I came to work for what was Ferrovial at that time. And after I had been here a little while, somebody came and they said, are you an arborist? And I said, yeah, but I don't do that anymore. And they said, well, we would really like to have it on the bids. And now there's a team of arborists that I oversee that we have, and sort of picked it up and kept going. And I've always loved trees, of course, and living sort of where everything is green. I miss all my beautiful trees in Utah. So I became a board certified master arborist just because I had the qualifications. It's not that hard of a test, but you have to have many years of qualifiable experience to qualify for the test. And so that's where it came from. I decided to go and do it. And I love continuing education. It gives me the opportunity to stay involved in the tree business a little bit.
That is such a great story. It's so fascinating. I say, when we've had this conversation before we came on, the thing I love the most about this podcast is we almost never, in fact, I can't think of a single time that we really went into regulations or compliance or laws, because we want to focus on the humans and we want to focus on the story and the journey, and people are fascinating. And I mean, the story that you began in the northern slope of Canada, and which, by the way, I used to do long time ago in the early 2000s. I supplied communications to oil rigs up in like Grand Prairie, way north. The stories that came out of that experience are incredibly challenging and interesting. So you ended up building this really successful company, which I did not even know, which is fantastic to hear this. And then you sold it. You came into this organization. So when you started, what was your role? And like, you're now no longer in Utah. You're now in Florida. You're now, I want to get into your personal story as well with wife and if you have kids and that as well. And we'll get there in a second. But how did you end up here?
When we sold the business in Utah, so I had just finished my master's degree, kind of late in life. Highway Patrol put me through school, so thanks to them. And my son graduated from college. My old dog, who was blind, passed away. And so we were just in a position where we thought, if this is the time to make a change, like if we want to make a change, this is the time, right? Everything is kind of in flux, and we could go somewhere. And I grew up in Alaska, and I've always missed the ocean. I want to go back to Alaska. We go fishing and there's an ocean. And my wife said, no, that's not the place. And so we had that discussion, and what she wanted was warm weather and sandy beaches. I started applying for jobs in places with ocean and warm weather and sandy beaches, and eventually ended up here. Got a job with Ferrovial. They called me up and hired me, and they said, we need you here for the start of a contract in 2 weeks. We had lived in that house for close to 20 years. And I just packed up and left. My wife will never forgive me. She did everything, so I'll never do that again. So I came here, and since I've been here, I never did the job they hired me for. That we didn't win that bid, and that kind of is the beginning of the story of how I ended up here. Is they had me, and I had to try and find a place where I had some value. That project was in Duval. And so I helped get that project started. And then I kind of got involved in third-party claims and just kind of, helping get the project up and running and finding things that I could do to make money. And, in addition to the tree service, we started and sold several other small companies. In this business, each project is sort of like a small business. So I fit in really well. And I was like, I can make this work. I can run crews. I know how to, I can make this work. But I didn't want to be a project manager. I was done being in business. I was like, hey, having a job is a cool thing. And so I just started looking around for areas where I could fit in. And I eventually got to a point where I thought, look, that portion of the company had been up for sale for a long time. And so they had divested some other pieces and maybe this one. And Ferrovial was kind of in flux as far as this division was. And over that time, we had gotten down to one safety director who was never anywhere, right? Because there was too many projects. You couldn't do it. And there was no safety structure at all. And so that was kind of, I looked around and I thought, wow, these guys there's no standardization. There's no training. There's no safety program here. Over the time that it's been for sale, it's just fallen to the wayside. And I don't know anything about safety.
What was your master's in? What did you graduate?
My bachelor's in emergency management and my master's in public administration. I only did that to expand. When I got my associate's degree in criminal justice, and then I got some good advice that told me, look, what you want to do for each progressive degree is expand it so that you have a wider umbrella that you can, more options. I just kind of started with the 5 projects in Northeast Florida. and I started making toolbox talks, and I started putting together training and just kind of standardizing things. We didn't do anything for investigations. Our OSHA rate was 5 plus. I mean, it was just what it was. It was kind of the wild, wild west. And so I started there and just started trying to figure out what, I was not used to being in a large corporate setting. And so I had to learn a lot there, but I could see the things that the people on the ground needed, right? Because of my past experience. And I said, these people don't have the projects are trying to keep people safe, but they don't have standardized training. They don't have a way, they don't have any learning from their incidents. They, crash a truck, buy another truck and put them back to work. And so the only possible ramifications were just discipline, right? You get fired or nothing. And so that's kind of where it started. I just started trying to create some sort of a system where we could have some accountability and where we could have some lessons learned and where we could manage our incidents. And we have people that it wasn't just on the job training for excavators, and that's how it was. And so I just slowly started here in Northeast Florida. They just kept giving me a little bit more and a little bit more.
Fantastic. Now tell me about the span of I know we mentioned you're in 40 some odd projects and they're quite significant, but where do you all do business? Like, are you in every state? Are you, where I mentioned some states that I had here in the span of your projects, but it might have been a snapshot of time that I wrote that down. So
Florida is our largest for the infrastructure division. Florida is our largest congregation of projects, and we've got 25 in Florida, but we have projects in Washington D.C. and Tennessee and Kentucky, California, Texas, Alaska, and Ontario. So lots of snowplow, 4 or 5 snowplow contracts in Ontario. So yeah, it continues to spread. And now that we're with Weber and Weber does so much in heavy civil, we're starting to have a lot of synergies there. They are moving into Florida. They've got some big heavy civil projects here in Florida now. We've got some infrastructure projects in Texas. So we continue to expand.
It's interesting that you mentioned the states that you're doing work in, and being a safety geek as I am, and also being a business owner, which you and I both have been and are. I would say the dynamic that you're dealing with the different requirements, and nobody's goal is to meet a minimum requirement. If you meet the requirement that we feel is standard, you should meet most of the state requirements as well. But there's always these funky things like California or, places that just have these OSHA, or Arizona has its own, there's 26 or 28, 29, something like that, states with their own regulations as well as federal. So what do you do from how are you managing all of that? Are you using external sources? Do you send your own people everywhere? Like, how do you do your trainings and surveys and annualized rig inspections and just things like that? How are you operating?
In some of those areas, we struggle, especially like California. And where we really struggle the most, the one good thing is that infrastructure maintenance is not it's kind of a niche industry. So it's not outsourced over the entire country. And so when we go into these places and when we start new projects, we have got quite a bit of sway with DOT and with the government in using OSHA to influence them in how the contracts are written and the requirements. And so luckily we have a lot of influence in a lot of areas like that. We operate under general industry, which gives us a little bit more flexibility. But in some areas, we definitely struggle. And one of the areas where we struggle a lot is a standard that we have set for ourselves is we have all of our people qualified at almost every single one of them qualified at the advanced level for temporary traffic control. Like in Florida, we have a team, we have our own in-house instructors, but then that changes different states. Kentucky, there's nothing. Virginia, we have their own standard. And there's not very many third-party trainers that really do that. And what's out there that's online is super difficult. And so it really can be a challenge.
Well, you can always use Yellowbird because we do that. I mean, we do that in every state. So
Yeah,
I don't even know if you knew that.
I didn't know that. Because what I don't like to do is I don't like online training. It's terrible. You don't have people pass it. You don't get quality training. Not for something like that, which needs a practical portion, and we'll need to get out there in the road and have personal stories. Because one of the things we've been talking about recently is the road is so different than what you think it is when you're driving down it, right? And I've always wished that we could take people and just make them stand with their toes on the white line, right? And now they'll understand, 10 minutes there and you'll have a different perspective of what the roadway is. It's always a challenge because there are all of those changes. We have been really lucky in the fact that Florida standards for temporary traffic control are some of the stringent standards in the country. And so we have been able to send our instructors in a lot of cases. And with very little modification, we can get our people qualified. And like you said, minimum standards, everybody is not required by the state to be up to that standard. So if we can get a couple of people up to the state standard, then we can give them the training that our instructors can provide, and they have what they need to be safe in the road, right? Because I like you mentioned, I care that they are more qualified than they need to be, but I don't really care who gave them the piece of paper.
I'm 1,000% with you. It's so interesting you have that philosophy. You said a couple of things during this conversation that make me smile for lots of reasons. One, when you came into this role and they didn't have all of these things, you put standards and processes in place, which essentially is what we've had to do, because you'd be surprised how many people are not like you. And they're like, oh, you know what? Send a safety professional. They'll know what to do. It's like, no, no, that's not the way it works. I need to get buy-in from your organization that this is meets your needs, your requirements. And then we can send out these needs and requirements out to qualified people on a standard process. So everybody's doing the same thing in that region. But you'd be shocked how many people don't have standards for their trainings or their surveys or their inspections. And so if you hire a trainer that goes in Florida, in Tampa, and you hire somebody with the same qualifications in quotes that is in Miami, and you say do a spotter or traffic safety training, could be completely different. It could be completely different, right? And it's interesting because you're right. It's become so apparent in our industry how fragmented the knowledge set is. I think it's the number one problem that we probably have in our industry is you take 10 people, you line them up and say, who does forklift training? All 10 of them will raise their hand. Say, who uses a standard? And they all raise their hand. You say, who uses the same standard? Not one of them is going to be raising their hand. And it's quite interesting, isn't it?
It's very, very different. And that kind of is the situation that I came into. Everybody said, yeah, sure, we're safe. Yeah, we do training. Yeah, we're keeping an eye on our people. Yeah, we're doing these things, but we have no idea how to do any of them. Right? Yeah, sure. We investigate our crashes at our project. We say, Joe, how did you crash? He says, well, the truck went off the road. And we say, okay, Joe's truck went off the road. Somebody get him a new truck. Now we've done our investigation, right? And there's no root cause analysis, and there's no standard by which you hold those things accountable to other similar incidents. And if you don't have that, that's where standards come from, right? If you can't hold things up, if you can't compare them to something similar, then you can't have a standard. It's been a huge challenge.
Is one of the things I think is the necessary or I should say it was like a happy byproduct of what we went out to build. We went out to build a platform that gave people the opportunity to do in-person trainings and surveys when they normally have done them online. Because I personally believe the same thing that you do, which is everything being equal, having somebody with experience train you in person is a better thing. If you can say, they're local, they understand the local laws, they understand the local industry. Ideally, they have worked within the business that you're in. Well, it's a heck of a lot better than here, go online, pass this test, and you're officially done. It's like, are you? Like, really? Are you? So going back to to your journey on the personal side, one, you told me about your suit and how your son just graduated from college. So congratulations for that. And is that how you ended up in Florida? Because he was in that general neck of the woods in that?
Not at all. It was my daughter that just graduated. My son got married 2 weeks ago. My daughter graduated last week, and so yeah, it's that's why I said I've been in a suit so much lately. I don't know what to do with myself. But no,
It brought a lot to celebrate, though, man. Congratulations.
yeah,
That's a successful life.
it's really great. It's awesome to see the kids, grow and start their lives. So it's been really awesome. But no, our kids, they were not so excited about coming here. As a matter of fact, my son, he had a girlfriend that he wanted to kind of bring here. He was 17. His plane went from Alaska to Florida, as opposed to stopping in Utah.
Yes, I
He
understand.
was a little bit surprised about that. They all like it now. It's been nothing but a blessing.
And your wife, you guys have been together a long time, I imagine. How long have you been married? I'm not putting you on the spot, but
29 years.
wow, good
Yeah,
for you.
29 years. So,
Good for you.
yeah.
Well, that's awesome. I mean, it's funny. I've talked to a lot of people on this podcast, and again, this is a human podcast, so I like to know the people we're talking to and their journey. And you've given a great story of your journey. I found that the people of safety and particularly have two commonalities. One, many of them have been married a long time. I've been married 25 years. I'm on average having conversations with folks like yourself in the 20 to 30-year range. Some of the earlier people, but they've been married, 7, 10 years. It's nice. I think I would wonder statistically, that's probably very unusual considering the number of these that I've done, to have the number of people that are happily or long-term married. And I'm not a counselor, so I'm not asking to go any deeper than that. But but I'll also say, and I'm going to ask you a question in the statement. The last 5 people that I've had this discussion with on the Canary Report were into hobbies that weren't traditionally that safe. So I had a guy that was an experimental pilot, built airplanes and flew them into the sky without any, it was pretty much, and he came from the Air Force. Another guy who drag raced, he had 1,000 horsepower Mustang doing drag racing. Another gentleman in his 50s that was a BMX, or not BMX, but a dirt bike motorcycle rider. And I've had a couple of skydivers. So I'm just curious, do you have any hobbies that are, I'm going to, well, I can already tell you like adrenaline, since you're an arborist in the world of very tall trees and probably didn't have any problem climbing them, if I'm guessing, given that's what you enjoy doing for a career. But do you have any hobbies in the world of excitement?
I do. So, I when I was younger, I was a commercial diver. And then when I worked for the Highway Patrol, I was on the dive team. And so I did a lot there. And then, of course, Florida, I came here and I thought, since all of the diving I had ever done was just in nasty water, you can't see bodies, whatever, none of it ever fun. I thought, here I come to the place of beautiful clear water and beautiful fish. And I decided we got here, I thought I'd get my wife certified. So we went and got her certified. And because I said, you got to have someone I can't teach you anything. I don't know any of the rules. Like, I didn't know. And so we got her certified. And it turns out the person that certified her, I became very close friends with. He runs the St. John's, the county I live in. He runs the police dive team here. And so I have found myself back out diving with the public safety divers. And what is good for them and what we do a lot for fun is we go look for megalodon teeth in one of the rivers here, which is just, you can't see the water in front of your face. It's a tidal river, so it's going very, very fast. It's always an adventure. My wife says the river tries to kill us every time we go there. But we live every time. And so, yeah, that's kind of my hobby now, and it is a lot of fun.
You know what? I'm like 6 for 6 now. I mean, nobody says that they're in an environment where they are looking to, knit scarves and wrap themselves in bubble wrap. I guess this industry is used to dealing with risk and understanding it and taking the precautions that are necessary, which is exactly what diving is and every other one of these things. It's not avoidance of risk, it's just understanding it and being diligent in the process. You mentioned that you were with the emergency rescue and the and what are you, sheriff or police or something like that on the dive program. When did you do that in your journey? Like you've had an interesting life, so you don't seem old. No, like that's another whole chapter. But how did you get into that?
Fear. So when 2007, 2008 were happening, and we owned our tree service and we had done fairly well in it, but we didn't have a retirement. And so in not, not much set away, it would all be in selling the business and whatever. And so we were super nervous at that time. In Utah, what you could do to get a retirement at my age in my 30s was become a cop, because they had a retirement that at 20 years, you get 50%. And so I put myself through the police academy at night and ended up, I spent a little while working in the prison, and then I got hired by the Utah Highway Patrol. And so as soon as they found out about my past, obviously Utah there's some deep reservoirs, but it's it's pretty mellow diving really. And so they said, guess what? You're on the dive team. Well, that was it. I spent most of my career with the Highway Patrol was not normal highway patrol career. Even I worked on the dive team and I worked on the DUI squad. So I didn't do a lot of crashes. I didn't write very many. I wrote one ticket a night, and that was somebody going to jail, and then there's not a lot of rescuing, as they like to call dive teams, like search and rescue. It's not really.
Yeah.
It's search and return, not
Search
search and rescue.
exactly. Where were you in Utah? Like I love Utah's one of my favorite places. My son and I go up there. He's 21 now and in college, but when he was a little bit younger, we used to RV up there. And I'm into, I'm restoring a Bronco, and I'm like into outdoors. And so I love Moab, and I've been up to, southern Utah a fair amount. Where were you in Utah?
We were in Salt Lake, South
Oh,
Jordan.
you were in Salt Lake, yeah.
Our house was in South Jordan. My wife was born in Bountiful, the area.
Okay.
So her family is all there.
Beautiful. Yeah, I've spent a fair amount of time up there, and but only during vacations. So it's a very different place during vacations than to live there. As I grew up in Southern California, and I can attest, I love Southern California more now that I go there to sit on a beach and have a margarita than when I lived there and watched my taxes go up and was second in office and lived in a house that was ridiculously expensive. So it's like now you go to these places to enjoy them, and then you go back to where you want to live and have a family.
It's about stages of life too, right? Like when I was in Utah, I didn't enjoy Utah that much. And that's because I was at work all day, every day, right? You're stuck in one place, you're trying to make a living, you're not there to really enjoy it. And so until I began with the Highway Patrol and the dive team, I hadn't traveled a lot of Utah, right? I've been in Salt Lake City and building a business and trying to take care of my family. So the perspective of someone that lives somewhere is not the same as someone that
People ask me all the time, you miss the beach? And I said, my house, I grew up in Huntington Beach, maybe a mile and a half, 2 miles from the ocean. My house was 8 miles from the ocean where I moved from. But in the last 4 years, I maybe went one time. Now, my kids went a fair amount. My wife went a fair amount, but I was in an office. And if I'm going to be in an office, I could be anywhere. So it's kind of like going on I used to do business in Hawaii. Same thing. You do not want to stay at Hilton Hawaiian Village when you're on a business trip. Everybody is all happy with their family and their kids, and they're going out on their excursions. And I'm putting on a coat and I'm going into a high-rise building. And it's like, I should be in Duluth or somewhere else that's not this beautiful without my family.
I spent 120 nights in hotels this year. And people always think, oh, you go everywhere. Isn't the traveling nice? And I said, the hotel could be down the street.
It doesn't matter. In fact, it's an interesting statement. That is one of the plights of the safety leader. It's the amount of things that we are expected to do on the road, and the number of days and weeks and hours that we spend in a car or on a plane, or, that you're not actually doing your job. And that was one of the things that I found to be compelling in our model. Just in general, I like the concept of hyper localization, where people with your knowledge and experience can run programs from their desk, making sure they're being successful. But you got to be air traffic control and not be the pilot. It burns folks out. It really does. Now, what does your wife do for? Does she have a normal work, or she's raised some successful kids, and that's wonderful.
She's always been in the background of our businesses. I can get people to do work. As you know, she's got a degree in graphic design and does a lot of that stuff for us kind of on the side and simpler, kind of a la carte stuff. And then now that we don't have any businesses, we do have some rental properties. And so that's kind of her thing now. They're in Utah where her family is, and they're pretty nice rental properties. And so she's very particular about, when people come in and go out, she goes there and interviews them and, make sure that she's got the right people. So she'll spend a couple of weeks there doing that whenever anybody comes and leaves. And then we just built a couple of years ago, we built a couple of places there, and she stayed there for almost a year and built them entirely herself. I mean, not with her own hands, right? But with
but she was
contractors.
she was the superintendent, and
She was the superintendent the whole time, and she's an amazing person. She's incredibly detail oriented. There's nothing that she does that's not done 110%. I'm an 80-20 guy, so we argue about that a little bit, but that's it. She's supported my career and my wild ideas for what we should go do. I never would have made it through college without her. The minute she found out the highway patrol would cover the bill, she was like, "Well, you got 6 classes."
There you go.
So I went through my degrees very quickly with her support.
Well, that's a great partner, and I feel the same way on my front. There's so many cliches and everything else, but the reality is that you need to have somebody who is helping you not destroy yourself, your family, your finances, your health, because when you're in the middle of it, you need a partner. And most people don't realize how dependent we become on our partner to help us get through these things. So I'm glad that you recognize that. It's really a special thing, and probably why you've been married 29 years.
I think that, you mentioned the people that you have interviewed have been, a lot of them have been married a long time. I think that you don't get to this level in safety without having a certain level of maturity and the ability to see what's important and focus on those things. And I think that without the right life experience, it's really difficult to be a successful leader in safety, because it's not like a leader in engineering, right? Where you can just go through the spreadsheets and it is very people centric. That takes a lot of life experience. And for my part, I've hired some people out of college with safety degrees, and not a one of them has ever worked out. Right. And so now we hire the people, not the degrees, and it works out much better. But that feeds into that longevity in relationships, because you understand how those things have to work, and you have to have the life experience somehow to be able to work with all these different people in all these different circumstances. If you're able to develop that ability before you get divorced and before you become a safety leader, well, you've got a good shot at carrying it a long ways, right? Because you can recognize the risks in any area and say, okay, I'm going to do something to mitigate them, whether that's in your marriage or in business.
Nate, thank you so much, my friend. I have enjoyed this conversation immensely. I hope that you've enjoyed telling the world or our listeners about you. Keep on doing the good work. Sounds like there could be some opportunities. I have no idea. I mean, I know that we helped you out with a opportunity. In fact, I'm going to share not the specifics because it doesn't matter, but I will say that you gave us an opportunity. It was our first job, and unfortunately the professional had an auto accident, and it happens. We do hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of jobs, and the way you handled it, the way that you were complimenting our team, and I appreciate that so very much, but it's because of the way you realized that it was out of our control, and we made it right as fast and as efficiently as we could. But it goes to show you, the world that we live in is dynamic as all get out. And even when you think you've done everything that right, and you're found the right person and did the right thing, and we got the person going out, and all of a sudden you get the call that they got and they're fine, thank goodness. And customers fine, you're fine. I mean, you're my customer. So at the end of the day, I just want to thank you for being so gracious in that journey, because you didn't have to be, and we would have always taken care of it, but you were wonderful. So thank you for that.
No problem. I'm glad we ended up with the right person in the right place, and it solved a huge problem for us where my team would be, at this moment, they would be filling in throughout the holidays from around the country, a week at a time. And so it's been a great relationship so far.
Love it, man. Well, thank you for that. Well, Merry Christmas. I know that by the time this comes out, it will already have come and gone, but I hope you have a wonderful holiday, and please don't be a stranger if you come out here. And if I'm ever in your neck of the woods, I'll look you up as well.
That would be great. Thank you, Michael. It's been a pleasure.
That's it for today's episode of the Canary Report. If this conversation helped you reframe how you think about risk and safety, please do me a favor. Hit subscribe, leave a review, and share it with somebody who needs to hear it. We're building a new category of safety and risk leadership, one that's faster and smarter. Leaders who aren't just empowered by tech, but whose wisdom is accelerated by it. To learn more about how Yellowbird's cutting-edge platform is empowering leaders to solve workplace safety and risk challenges faster, smarter, and at scale, visit goyellowbird.com. Don't forget to subscribe to our Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and Yellowbird pages to stay up to date. Until next time, lead with clarity, know first, and act fast.